what I plan to do, and that's calling up my broker and saying, hey, I would love to see the Canary Capital HBAR ETF available to me as an investment product for my platform.
So I am here with Greg Bell with the HBAR Foundation. He is focused on financial markets, and the one thing that he's been focused on most recently has been the Canary Capital ETF. He gave a great discussion with Stephen from Canary Capital at Hedera just a few days ago. Greg, how has that process been to this point? I know you've been really integral in making that come to fruition. What's that look like?
It's really the intersection between traditional finance and Web3 comes in really two flavors, right? Are you bridging a crypto asset and wrapping it in a traditional format like an ETF and making it available to a larger audience and those that have brokerage assets? Or inversely, are you taking a traditional financial asset and tokenizing it and making it more accessible and function in a Web3 environment?
Sure.
So I think there's a real need and purpose for both. As it relates to the HBAR ETF, and certainly NASDAQ's filing last week of their 19B4, this is a big step towards making HBAR accessible to all the wealth that exists today in traditional brokerage accounts. And so when you think about, the generational wealth that is held in traditional ETFs and stocks and bonds and whatnot, you've got, I think, around 15 trillion of assets that are sitting in ETF format, right? And I mentioned this the other day, when it comes to assets that are in the crypto space in the ETF format, we're only at around 100 billion or so. So there's really just the beginning that's just got to go in here. And so, it's working with the institutional players that are in these markets, which has been really beneficial to Hedera and all the work that has been done historically with the governing council and the brand recognition here. And so I'm really excited about introducing HBAR and introducing Hedera to a whole new population who already knows the IBMs, Googles, Dells of the world, right? Who already has an affiliation with these brands. And to be able to now give them a new product that is interacting with Web3 in an institutional way, I think is a real game changer.
When it comes to who holds most of the wealth, you're talking about boomers, you're talking about Generation X and the older millennials.
Yes.
I've always felt like HBAR and Hedera would resonate more with them. And now with this traditional wrapper of an ETF, they're going to get that much more access, right?
Well, that's the idea. I think the way that we saw Bitcoin come to market over the last few years and the acceptance that has grown through just the various distribution channels. And so that's the gateway drug. And I think that's been the way for most of us that are in the Web3 ecosystem is that, the first purchases are Bitcoin, right? And then it's exploring what other assets, what other networks can provide in terms of unique utility or functionality. I think that same process is going to, be followed through brokerage. And so those that are gaining exposure to the Bitcoin ETFs will say, all right, I've enjoyed this experience. Hopefully it's, been quite profitable for them. And then what are the other avenues by which they can gain exposure to the Web3 economy more broadly? And the HBAR ETF will be one of those avenues.
And it's going to be one of the first. So we already have the Bitcoin, which is probably one of the most successful ETFs in history, right?
Yes.
Ethereum has been fairly successful in its own right. Now we're getting the combined Bitcoin Ethereum ETFs.
Yep.
The next one's up on the list look like it's going to be Litecoin, potentially HBAR. And from what I heard from Stephen the other day, even though people expect Solana, that might not come to fruition too quickly, right?
Yeah. Well, anytime that an asset manager like Canary Capital is bringing a new product to market, they have to engage with the SEC. They have to engage with the exchanges, in this case, NASDAQ for the listing of the HBAR ETF, and a variety of different other institutional players that enable distribution of these assets. So those are the Fidelities, the Schwabs, the Pershing, the Sleet, Bank of New York, and SEI as other examples. They really are the gatekeepers to a large population of either investment advisors or individual retail that has capital on brokerage accounts. And so it's working with all of these parties to collectively. And I think there's a feedback loop and there's a process. And certainly with Stephen's experience having brought the Valkyrie Bitcoin ETF to market, has certainly helped in terms of knowing the road, knowing the path, knowing the players to facilitate new products in the market.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to define this, but from what Stephen was saying the other day, the kind of feeling I got was, this could be 2-3 months out that we could potentially see this come to market. Well, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, so what there is within any regulatory filing is a very clear roadmap whenever there is a filing that is occurring here. And so there are feedback loops, there are timelines that need to be met. Now, of course, those can be extended. There can be denials. There can be various parties that say, we need to see certain things changing. But often it's around regulatory disclosure. It's around ensuring that the right parties are in place. And I think that a lot of that hard work has been done by Canary Capital and the ecosystem and participants that they have put in place in terms of custody from Coinbase, custody from BitGo, administration from US Bank. And the NASDAQ providing it the exchange listing. So there's a lot of amazing work that the Canary Capital team has done. And as a participant in the Hedera ecosystem, it's just very, very exciting because it grows the ease of accessibility.
Sure.
Right? That's ultimately what this is about. There are many people that have an interest in getting exposure to a Web3 ecosystem, to Hedera specifically. Mm-hmm. But the obstacles relating to movement of capital, on-ramping to new service providers, dealing with self-custody or new custody providers, that's real friction. And so when you're able to embed it directly within a brokerage ecosystem and make it just a few clicks.
No question.
Yes.
Yes.
Game changer.
It's a huge on-ramp for potential HBAR holders. Now, I know it's a good thing when we start to see amendments being made. That means there's probably some dialogue taking place between the SEC and Canary Capital. The last thing that I want to ask you about, you hit on this in your discussion the other day, is you can have these ETFs, they could be a tremendous success like what we saw with Bitcoin, but they can also fall flat. So we want to make sure this one is successful. So for the HBAR holders out there already, what would you tell them to do to make sure that this is a success?
So, I can only speak from my personal experience, what I plan to do, and that's, calling up my broker and saying, hey, I would love to see the Canary Capital HBAR ETF available to me as an investment product for my platform. And so that's, reaching out to Fidelity, that's reaching out to Schwab, that's reaching out to, E-Trade and Morgan Stanley and, the various avenues by which people gain exposure to all of our different stocks, because they want to see client demand. And the reality is they have to respond when people are calling and saying, I want to see this product, right? It's making a list of various, demand. The larger the demand, then they move more quickly. And so we've seen that play out in the Bitcoin ETF space. And I think that same process holds true for HBAR. And then there are all the ecosystem participants as well. It's not just retail, it's also the industry. So what we've seen is exciting developments relating to futures markets that are coming with the CFTC regulated products. We've seen new, investment banks and other financial providers that are providing research on HBAR, providing new market making infrastructure. So there's a whole ecosystem that is already out there for traditional financial products that is now able to interact with HBAR, with this product, to the extent it comes to market, in a way that it hasn't been before. So that's really, really very exciting.
All right, so you heard what Greg said. Get on the phone with your brokerage because we want to make sure this is a success. I know personally I'd like to shift 20% of my HBAR holdings. If this comes to fruition and I have access to it, I'd like to shift some of those over to try to make sure that we have those capital flows into it. But Greg, thank you so much for the work you've put into.
Well, I think that the ability to have some ETF products in retirement accounts is a really compelling reason.
Sure.
Because I look at myself and I say, all right, there's assets that I hold in various wallets on a personal basis, and then there are assets that I hold for retirement and that are in tax-efficient structures. And so the tax-efficient 401ks, IRAs, etc., like those are, usually these IRAs are ones that you have a little bit more control of and are tax efficient in the United States to be able to say, all right, I'm getting exposure to ETFs. And so to me, it's not necessarily a this or that, it's an and question.
It's a huge point. And the last thing that I want to ask you about is, it's certainly important to get people to want to come into the HBAR ETF, but I think a lot of people are going to want to say, all right, this entire crypto space is a little bit confusing. I just want to pick an index fund of all these different assets in one ETF. Do you think that's going to be the next step for Hedera and HBAR?
I'm excited. So once there's a single asset product, then I think multiple asset basket products are the natural evolution. And so, that's where you can get indirect exposure to a larger thematic play, and I would expect those to come.
All right, perfect. Well, again, Greg, thank you so much for all the effort you've put into this. The fact that HBAR is going to be one of these first altcoin ETFs is a tremendous success, so we appreciate it.
It's been a fun ride, and there's lots more of development, and the intersection of traditional financial markets and Web3 is only just beginning, so there's more to come.
I'm now posting these interviews of Hedera builders independently to my channel. The community, influencers, and media outlets are free to use this content to spread the word on what's being built on Hedera. Once they're all uploaded, you'll be able to go to my channel and search for whatever topic or team you're interested in to find more information. Or you'll be able to get the most recent Hedera news by watching the latest HBAR Weekly update, so check them out.